Hi, I'm sitting here talking and I totally forgot to add myself to the stream, so you all missed my greeting. Okay. Hi, Cement Shoes. Hi, Jen. Hi, Mo. Hi, Nonstop Mom. Hi, Anita Sparkles. Hi, Sam. How's everybody doing on this Monday? Whew, it's been a day already, y'all. Already. So, there's been some developments in some cases. Obviously, the first one I'm going to talk about would be Quentin Simon, as suspected, as we all guessed, and me probably more than anybody. Well, than you guys. I don't know about anybody. I don't know what other people think. I can't say that. So, for me anyway, there was a small, teeny tiny little bit of me that was hoping that the DNA results would not be a match to Quentin, but they are, and so now, bless his little heart, he can be laid to rest, and the his mother can start on her path to receiving justice. So yeah, it just breaks my heart. It just all these cases, they all break my heart, really, not just the children's cases, all of them. Um, Now, the other case that I was going to talk about, which we were sort of talking about this morning, is a case in Florida, and it's called the face biter case. Okay, and it took place in 2016, so it's been a while. All right, and let me pull something up really quick so I can um, see what I'm talking about. Um, Sorry, I got some, like a tickle in my throat. I don't know what's going on with me, but anywho, well, I was going to talk. We were going to talk about that case tonight, but that case has reached a resolution. This morning, are you kidding me? What the frack? Um, Hang on a second. This morning, um, that trial, it was supposed to start today, okay, but it did not start today because the state and the defense reached an agreement. And quite frankly, it's weird to me, about this specific agreement, because, and we'll get into it, but I'm going to save it for another night because because an agreement was reached. Okay. Um, there was no trial, obviously, and they skipped straight to the victim impact statements, and they were very, very. I mean, I was blown away by them, but they're a lot to take, and given what we're going to be watching tonight, I felt like it might be too much. Where is this dadgum thing I'm trying to find? Here it is. So, anywho, so there was no trial, and some would say, including some of the victims, the family of the victims, there was no justice. Okay, so hold on a second. Judge or Austin Harrouf, 25, had decided to face the judge, not a jury, for killing couple John Stevens III, 59, and Michelle Mishkin, 53, in a grisly beating and stabbing double homicide. Authorities say Harrouf also stabbed the couple's neighbor, Jeffrey Fisher, who attempted to intervene. As he pleaded not guilty by reason of insanity, the question was whether he was mentally culpable for the slayings. The judge decided that Harrouf was insane at the time. Both sides of the case fought a tug of war during the pretrial period over his mental state during the 2016 incident. Authorities said that Harrouf attacked Stevens and Mishkin at the couple's home in Martin County. Investigators claimed to find him biting Stevens' face. Dr. Philip Resnick, an expert for the defense, determined in 2019 that Harrouf was, quote, actively psychotic, end quote, because he kept on doing that even when cops ordered him to stop, tased him, and kicked him multiple times in the head. Resnick determined that the defendant suffered from, quote, clinical lycanthropy, end quote, expressed a close connection to canines, and believed himself to be half man, half dog. Even Dr. Gregory C. Landrum, an expert for the state, said Harrouf appeared legally insane. Quote, forensically, given the above findings, absent evidence of drug usage at the time of the incident, and observations made by first responding law enforcement officers, it is reasonable to conclude that Mr. Harrouf was experiencing a decompensated mental state associated with an emerging mood and or thought disorder resulting in an acute psychotic episode, he wrote in 2020. As a result of this condition, it is opined that Mr. Harrouf was unable to distinguish right from wrong, end quote. So, I definitely want us to talk about that. I'm disappointed because I think that the victims' family and the victims themselves deserved a trial, quite honestly, and especially because this happened in 2016 and it dragged on for so long trying to decide whether or not he was legally insane at the time. But I also wanted a trial because I think that there is a small chance that Lori Vallow is not going to, I don't think she's going to try for a whole not guilty by reason of insanity plea. I don't think that she's going to go that far, but she is, I think, going to use some type of mental health or personality, some kind of issue to diminish her role in the murder of kiddos. Hang on just a second. Let me let Nestor out. Just give me a sec. Sorry about that. Okay. Is my sound okay? I told you guys I got a new microphone and I not completely comfortable or used to it, and so I'm having like growing pains and I'm forever self-conscious of how I sound, especially after that one comment that lady left me that person, I don't know whether they're male or female, but anyway, they said that my voice was killing them or something like that, and they even time stamped it, which I have to say, while I appreciate the constructive criticism, I feel like if somebody's voice was that annoying to me, I wouldn't have made it 29 minutes in. But that's just me. I'm pretty quick about deciding whether I like something or not. I don't really mull around too much over it. Thank you, Jen. I appreciate that. It's not too loud. Okay, good. So on to what happened today. Y'all, if you weren't around this morning, which some of you guys were not, Cement was here, Jen was here. We had what can only be described as the most lackluster closing statements I have seen in a very long time. Quite frankly, I took, thank you. I feel like uh, this, I was, I don't know why. I was expecting anything different today with the closing, arguments, because I mean, I'm familiar with Angela Buzz and how she does things. So I don't know why I expected anything different, to be quite honest with you, but for some stupid ass reason, I did. And I'm not going to even pretend. I was very, very, very disappointed. Um, I thought that there were, and again, Blonde Crime Network, please, we need subtitles, okay? Particularly in this um, trial, because the audio is terrible, and the and completely sometimey. And so we rely on the subtitles to somewhat have an idea of what the people in the courtroom, hi, and 5678 are saying. And I just would really like you to just stop disabling closed captioning, please. I'm very upset about that. Your friend, Jen Liu. Okay. So anyway, there were a lot of points in the beginning of her opening or her closing statement where I frankly thought that she fell short. She, first of all, she used like 87 times in the first, I don't even know, 10 or 15 minutes, and that might be even being generous. The other problem I had is that, in my opinion, closing arguments are intended to give the whole synopsis of the trial, right? Because at this point now you've had the testimony, all right, so you're supposed to give a synopsis on that, but more importantly, it is somewhat of a reminder to the jury when it all is said and done, both sides have given their closing arguments, the state has given their rebuttal, and the jury instructions have been given, and they go back there to deliberate, right? It's really supposed to be, in my opinion, I think these are the most effective ones, sort of a highlight, a reminder of what evidence they should be, like, if they have any questions, or they, just to review. Because the truth of the matter is, in this case, which Angela Canepa said, I don't even know how many times, about the circumstantial evidence. Okay. And also the other thing that was really annoying to me today, and I'm sorry that to anybody listening now, and I'm not trying to rag on her. She is an incredibly intelligent woman, and she knows the law like the back of her hand. When she makes arguments about the evidence, why it should be submitted, about jury instructions, when the defense objects and she argues why their objection should be overruled, or when she raises an objection, she makes an argument for why the objection should be sustained. She is clearly incredibly capable. She is a good attorney. She is just not great at the closing arguments or the opening arguments in this trial. I don't know about other trials, but in this one, not so good. Okay. But she kept using the term ironic. And the examples that she was citing weren't actual examples of irony. Sort of like the Alanis Morissette song, isn't it ironic? None of those examples that Alanis sings about are actual examples of irony. An example of irony would be spraying Calvin Klein Eternity cologne to cover up the scent of a dead body. That's irony, because obviously eternity, but then fatality. Okay, that's irony. So, hey, LFT, good to see you. So anyway, that was very annoying to me. The term that she was really describing was coincidental. That's really what it was. But whatever. I'm going to. There you go. Boom. Just like that. Not a single example of irony. So anyway, but much like she did in her opening, she's focusing on certain details of the case that, quite frankly, it's not that they're not important. It's not that they're irrelevant. They're all important. They're all relevant. But there's a lot of talk about what Jake and Angela did. And the truth of the matter is, Jake and Angela are not on trial. They've pled guilty. They took a plea deal. Okay. And there was not a ton of direct evidence. Okay. Now, there was the shoe print in blood found at 2 scenes. And it took her forever to getting around to putting George in the size 11s. Okay. And the thing of it is that much of the case really relied on the testimony from Wagner. Their testimony played. And here's why. Because you're going to hear it in when I play the closing arguments, okay, or the rest of them. But one of the things that prosecution did was keep Angela and Jake from knowing what their statements were. Okay. And so if they would have made that argument during that whole, are we going to let them opt out part of it, that I would have understood much more than his life might be in danger because snitches get stitches, yada, yada, yada. They did not want either one of them, which it was not really, it didn't really apply to Jake because Jake testified first and that's how it was going to be, right? But more for Angela. They did not want Angela knowing anything that Jake said in his testimony, just like they didn't want them knowing what each of them said in their statements as part of their plea agreement, because they wanted it to be independently corroborated, which is important. And that I really wish that she would have honed in on that fact in opening, more in opening, and also a little more in closing. I caught it. I hope that the jury catches it, because them not knowing what the other one had said is important when they're giving their testimony. And I thought that was a key element and a key point. And I felt like I wish that she would have expounded on that or driven that home just a little bit more than she did. She did eventually get around to putting George at the crime scenes. And I have to say that after we left her this morning, she got much better. I don't know what happened. I don't know if during that 15-minute break she took a 5-hour and the caffeine and the niacin and all the B 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 12s kicked in or what. But it was much better after we left, or excuse me, we didn't like leave, like we're actually in the courtroom, but after I stopped streaming. And so, like I said today, her closing argument lasted all day, right? And so tomorrow morning we will start with the defenses, and I'm quite curious what their damage control, but from what their closing argument would be. And I will say this: I think, as far as being to write out and deliver a closing, I think that I think I could have done it in 2 hours. Now, I'm not an attorney, and I'm not even claiming to be an attorney. Okay. But I felt like it's too long, and that she was losing the jury. And you just want to you want the jury to remember certain aspects of the case. It is incredibly important for you to first talk about the victims and what happened to them. And that's very, very important. Very important. And she did that. Okay. But you don't have to go over. Hey, Mark. Good to see you, babe. It doesn't, in my opinion, you don't need to, as Angela Canepa said repeatedly, belabor the point. I don't know if you understand what belaboring means, because you were belaboring, in my opinion, the wrong points. Okay. I would not have focused so much on what Jake and Angela did, because Jake and Angela, hello, they're not on trial, like I said earlier. So for me, I thought that this was an unnecessarily, I have to agree with you. I think it because it was so long, and because it was there was so much evidence, that it would be longer than your average closing statement. Absolutely, I do. But I also think that your time, and in my opinion, there were times when she did not do that. There were things that she could have highlighted. For an example, when Jake testified, he talked about how the plan, he didn't see well at night. Okay, which is when they started all of this. It was 10:30 at night, and he didn't see well at night. In fact, that's why when George and Jake were team driving, they had Jake did during the day and George did it at night, right? So in order to hammer that point home, okay, which is why, according to Jake, George was supposed to take the first shot at Chris Sr. But to hammer that point home, she could have reminded the jury about how often George hunted, and particularly at night. But she didn't make that connection. That's what I'm talking about. It was like, let me just play it. I'm already failing today. I've started talking to you guys, and I didn't even add myself to the stream. And then, hold on, let me see.
The defendant can beat him up, right? Because he.
I want you to hear this, because we didn't hear it this morning.
That oil filter there. That she was making for these homicides. All of those.
All right, I think we're good. Okay, are we ready? Okay, I'm going to answer LFT. So in my opinion, I have not watched list reviews. I've not watched the closing arguments in their entirety. To be perfectly honest, I put it on after their lunch break, and I got up too early. I got up early this morning, and I went to bed late last night, and I took a nap. I fell asleep. So, I can't honestly answer that at this time. However, we're going to watch this and then I'll be able to tell you. We're also going to watch her. I'm sorry that there aren't closed captioning. There's not a whole bunch left of this part of it. I'm going to put her at 1.5. The second part of it is only like an hour and a half, and that does have closed captioning, and we'll speed that one up too, but we'll have the captions, so it'll work. Honestly, in my opinion, at this point, I don't think that she got all 12 jurors taking away her point. I really don't. I don't. I think probably she got probably 8 of them, and probably 4 of them were just like, bruh. They were like me. Okay. So here we go. Let me speed her up.
Corroborate each other. You know, again, getting ahead of myself here a little bit because I'm certainly going to talk about George's testimony. But the differences in their testimony was very stark, right? George and Angela just answered the questions. I got a whole lot of I don't remembers out of George Wagner when he was testifying. Even though he could remember things when he was a child in great detail, you know, he could seem to remember what he said at the border to agents, you know, for a 4-hour interview, which one would think, you know, again, that's a pretty unique situation that he would remember exactly. And he did remember some things, right? He remembers saying when I was questioning him about the fact that he called his grandmother a whore, called his 4-year-old niece at the time a bitch, called Randa, Tabitha, Beth Ann, and I threw in Hannah in there. Because at the border, he had said that he heard that she had turned into a whore. And he remembered that. He remembered saying that because that's inconsequential. But he said he didn't remember a whole lot of things that mattered, right? But we'll talk about that. So what did we get from Jake Wagner regarding George, right? We get that George was involved in the purchase of the murder truck, the truck that they used the night of the homicide, sorry, and that George helped him modify it. He helped him build that frame, and you saw our interpretation of that contraption. We based it on what he said under oath, you know, during his testimony. And I think Special Agent Scheider indicated that he went back and looked at the transcript, but you know, he said he had the 2x4s.
Hey, Melissa, good to see you.
And he even said
All right, I'll be right back, but I'm in
and
chat.
so we did
Y'all
that
behave.
into the platform there, the plywood on there, just as he said, and he said he screwed it in. So that's what we did. But he said that George helped him with that because he needed help with that, and then also helped him put either the straw or the hay. It was straw or hay that night. He indicated to you that George was, quote, always the SKS guy. Jake was the 1911-22, and his dad was the 40 Glock. That's who had which weapons. He indicated to you that a few days before the homicides that Billy told George that he wanted George to shoot Chris in the head from a distance so that Chris Sr. would not know what was happening, so that he would be killed instantly and never know what happened, and certainly not know that Billy was participating in this crime against him. We know that George was present when the shoes were bought. We know that George wore the shoes the night of the homicides. We know that George also wore ski masks. They had the black ski masks, the kind that you just saw inadvertently, I think, on the, you know, in Boondock Saints. We know that they had on dark clothing and that he crawled into the back of that truck with Jake. And they had their weapons back there with them, and they went up to the hill. And you'll recall a moment that Jake relayed that on the way up there, Billy stopped the car and opened the gate to the truck just to make sure that everybody was feeling like this is still something we're going to do, right? And you know that they then proceeded to go up there, and that when Jake got out of the vehicle and George got out of the vehicle, that George had the SKS, and that they both laid under 2 different trucks and in the prone position. And George, again, was supposed to be the one that shot Chris, which again makes sense because the gun, SKS, is listed as belonging to him, first of all. And we now know from Jake that that is an inventory, not a wish list, despite the fact that George tried to convince everybody it was a wish list. And we also know that George doesn't like the SKS, right? Or Jake doesn't like the SKS because he had one that jammed on him. He found it unreliable. So just ask yourselves, if you're going to kill people for the first time in your life, presumably, do you take a gun with you that you don't like and that you find unreliable? So again, that makes sense. It internally and externally, Jake's statement makes sense that George was the one who had the SKS and was supposed to shoot Chris Sr. that night. You heard testimony from the defendant that Jake has vision problems at night. That's why when they drive together, George drives through the night, right? So again, you're shooting from a distance, not a great distance, but a distance. And you've got that oil filter there on the end of the SKS, not helping with the vision much. And then Jake tells you that Chris passes up and he gets to the spot where George should have shot and George doesn't shoot. He doesn't know. He doesn't know if George froze. He doesn't know if George couldn't see, didn't have a good line of sight because of that oil filter. He doesn't know because he never discussed it with him. But then you heard that Billy came out there and asked what was going on and had Jake take the weapon instead and told him he had one more chance and he heard his dad telling Chris to call his phone to see if he could find his phone, which brought Chris to the door. And then you heard that Jake shot him then. Again, very tight group. You'll see the photographs, very tight group of shots on that door frame. But then we know that Billy was inside the home. Jake was not inside the home. Jake was doing shooting of his own. He said he heard 2 shots. You heard from their expert that sometimes you don't hear all the shots that occur. It doesn't even matter. Again, he was firing shots himself. And we know that Billy was inside the home and that Chris and Gary end up dead. Then you know that Jake says he gets the keys and goes up to the grow room to start working on getting cameras. You also heard that Billy is frantic. I think Jake described him as having a nervous breakdown. I'm not sure if that was on direct across, but he was very upset because the plan didn't go as it was supposed to, right? It wasn't all nice and neat and tidy. He had to get his hands dirty. He shot his best friend, what he calls his best friend. And he hadn't anticipated having to do that. And he did not react well, right? So he's outside, just kill me, just shoot me. I just killed my best friend. He's upset. So Jake spends some time calming him down, talking him through it. George is standing there too. Ultimately, Jake goes in and gets the keys from Chris and goes up to the grow room. He says when he comes back down, he goes back into Chris and Gary's home and retrieves a cell phone. And he says at that time, both Gary and Chris's body had been drugged back. He wasn't there. He doesn't know for sure who did it, but we know that both Jake and George's shoes are inside that. And what else do we know? Well, you heard testimony that Billy, quote, broke his back. Now, George was kind of scoffing at him the other day about that, but that was before January of 2016 because it was when they still owned their truck, that truck and trailer that they got from Bernie Brown that burnt, and that was the end of their cow business. But that he was gone by himself and apparently got squished up, against a wall and claims that he broke his back. We at least know that the defendant can beat him up, right? Because he bragged about that. He was pretty proud of himself about that. So, and we also know that the defendant ironically uses the same term to describe, Jake uses the same term to describe the defendant as the defendant used to describe Kenneth, which is he's as strong as a bullock. So we know that George is a strong guy. He considers himself stout, is what he said. So, lifted an engine block, maybe not out of the car, but onto a trailer or something, he said. So, think to yourself, what is the logical answer here? Again, it's kind of like that SKS. Billy, who has a broken back, who is obviously not as strong as George, and who was just a frantic mess over killing his best friend, do you think he's a likely choice to then drag Gary and Chris's bodies back to the back? Again, in the end, it doesn't much matter. We know that George went into that room, and we know that he stepped into blood, and we see it on our diagrams exactly where that was. Then we know they went to Frankie's, locked, will come back. They go past Dana's. Dana is not home yet from work. They know that she's working late. They go down to Left Fork, see what's going on down there. They come back and park back at Chris's. They are in Chris's truck at this point. Jake was not a part of that decision. So either George or Billy or the two of them together made that decision. And it's a smart decision from the aspect of, if Kenneth sees you pulling up, he thinks it's his brother Chris. If Dana sees that vehicle pulling up, she thinks it's Chris. So there's no alarms that go off before they can make entry into the home. So then they walk back down to Frankie's, and this time they try the back door.
Hey,
Jake
bowling
tells
with
you
cotton balls. Hey, Utter. How you doing? Missed you guys. Good to see you. Hope your Thanksgiving, if you celebrate, was good.
It's not broken off, is it? At which point I showed him the damage, and again, you'll have these exhibits. The damage to Frankie's door,
comment, because I wanted to
I don't know if
talk
part of the
about that,
metal
'cause he's
door
right.
broke off, and that's what he heard, or that's what he saw, and he thought it was a knife. I have no idea. But then he makes entry through that back window, and he says he hands his gun to his dad, slithers in to that house.
I have to say, Mark, I 100% agree with you. There would be zero reason for Jake and Angela to say that George was there if he wasn't. Honestly, there wasn't. And so I agree with you. I am just hoping the jury sees it that way as well. Because remember, what they have to do is very different than what we can do. You know what I mean? Like, it's going to be up to it's going to depend greatly on the jury instructions. Those are extremely important. I never realized how important jury instructions were until the Casey Anthony trial.
And he took great care to lock the back door so that Brentley wouldn't get out. And then they go back to the truck that was at.
Yeah, you guys behave or I'll have to get Alice. Nobody wants that.
And they go to Dana's house. And allegedly the door is open. They walk in. They were prepared to pick the lock if they need to.
I hope so. I really do, Mark. I hope so. I hope that they're able to connect the dots.
Home.
Because I 100% think that George is 11 billion% guilty. There is no doubt in my mind that he was up to his neck involved in this.
He was done shooting Chris, and we know that he shot 6 rounds because that's the number of projectiles that are recovered at that location. And he said at that time he gave the SKS back to his brother. And he says that his brother had that SKS when he was inside.
Hey, Corky, good to see ya. Oh, Alice has been muy malice today. Coolest. She is one. She gets like this every time it cools off.
By the door and facing little Chris's room.
She's been an absolute heathen, you guys. Just an absolute terror.
Killing Dana. And
after I got off the live today, I left my bedroom / office and went to change out laundry. She was on. Oh, I got to tell you guys this other thing real quick. Hold on. Let me pause her. Okay. So after I went and did all that, I left the bedroom and I came back because, you know, when we left, she was sitting in my lap. Then I had to get up and I had to do, grown up stuff. Right. So I was doing that. And when I came back in here, she was on top of the dadgum bookshelf, which has these decorative glass things that my mom gave me a long time ago. And, you know, it could have very easily ended in tragedy. Thankfully, it did not. Also, the bookshelf is not like bolted to the wall or anything because, hello, it's Florida. These walls are, there's drywall, but it's also, cinder block. So it makes it like hard to, what do you call that? Anchor anything in. But I have to tell you guys this, and then we'll get right back to the, hey, Turtle Dove, good to see ya. And then we'll get right back to her closing argument. So on Friday, my daughter and her boyfriend went Black Friday shopping. And they went, not incredibly early for them, 9 o'clock. So they're out and about, and they come home around, I don't know, 1 or 2. And um, I had just cleaned the whole house from top to bottom. And I was watching something. Oh, I was watching Wednesday. If y'all haven't seen that on Netflix, by the way, it's actually quite good. You should check it out. Tim Burton, once again, doesn't disappoint at all, and the acting's really good in it. I have to say, was really impressed. But anyway, I'm turning into Angela Canepa. So they said to me, "Hey, come out here. We got you something, but we couldn't wrap it." And I was like, "Okay." So he hands me, and his face so stinking cute. How excited he was for me to see this. They got me Lego Star Wars Darth Vader head. So I got to put that together. I need to take a picture of it. Okay. That's all I wanted to tell you. Let's get back to her because now I sound like her, all long-winded and talking about irrelevant shit.
He told you about how he.
Thank you, Anita. I appreciate that. Thank you so much.
You know what else I was going to say?
Thank you so much.
When you are looking at the shoe evidence, and you probably remember this because we specifically asked Ms. Elliott.
Thank you, Turtle Dove.
And this is V21, but it can be used in conjunction with the other photographs from the scene. But she testified that the shoe print was facing towards little Chris's room by the front door, is where this shoe print was, in the direction it was facing. So, and that was the size 11, again, left shoe print that was left there. So again, Jake's information continues to be corroborated. That was something that came out in trial. That's not something, that he's making a statement around, right? That information of the direction of the shoe was at that point unknown. So he talked to you about how he killed both Dana and Hannah, that Dana was on her phone. He could see that she was, and later discovered she was on Facebook. And that he kind of froze until Kylie started crying, and he saw Hannah raise up as if she was going to nurse her baby. And at that point,
yummy.
He took 2 steps into.
I could go for some coffee right about now.
And gasped. He shot her 1 or 2 times. He couldn't remember. And then he walked back and did the same thing to Hannah Mae, who also turned and saw him and made an audible sound. He told you he then went to little Chris's room. Well, actually, he said he came out of Dana's bedroom. He went back into Dana's room and shot her some more because she was making noises. And when he opened her door and you saw in the you can go into Dana's room 2 ways. So he had stepped in through here up top, but when he exited, it was out here through the kitchen. And when he opened the door to exit, he said that his dad was standing there with this 40 Glock.
It's because she's moved away from the mic and there's other stuff going on in the background.
In case anything goes south.
But I have her turned up all the way and I don't, there isn't
he said George is right behind
subtitles available, Corky. I'm so sorry.
He went into little Chris's room, shot him in the back of the head repeatedly. Chris was most likely asleep. And then he went about picking up shell casings and gathering phones and phone cords and such. And then they exited that residence. Went back, got in the truck, went back to Chris Sr.'s where they got the truck that they had got from Uncle Todd. They drove down to Left Fork Road, and you heard Jake's testimony that George stayed at that pull-off. And he and his dad, who were in the same vehicle, drove right up to Kenneth's. And his dad got out of the vehicle and entered the residence. And he said he saw a flash, and his dad came back out. And then they went about doing what they had done in all the other locations, which is to gather any surveillance cameras or
Corky.
other items that they could find. And then he went back drove past where George was, and he said he thought his dad signaled to his brother, and his brother followed him back up to Chris Senior's, and then they all piled into the truck that they had bought from Uncle Todd and went back to Peterson Road. And then Jake tells you that once they were back, they drove back up to the barn.
Definitely, Anita.
The truck had been parked because they were keeping it out of view so people didn't see it. And he set about destroying the physical evidence, right? Burning the clothing, anything that could be burned was burned. Said he ran out of fuel with his torch, and tried to cut some of the objects up, tried to destroy the firing pins, other things that would be helpful to investigations in trying to do ballistics, etc. And that he then dug a hole, or that actually George helped him dig a hole in the barn near one of the posts so that they could bury that property temporarily until they could get it out and further dispose of it. And then he talks to you about, going off to do something and being called back to the home and, finding out what had happened and what he did throughout his day. And he also talked to you then about everything that happened after that, right? All the paranoia that they had. I haven't obviously gotten to Angela's statement yet, but Angela talks about Billy talking to Jake and George and her one time out by a fence saying,
I do think the paranoia is obvious.
You need to understand that once you do this, your lives will be changed forever.
Through those
You have to be
audios.
careful about where you're talking, who you're talking to, no cell phones in the same room when you talk, put the cover over the TV, run water or whatever when you're talking. Very, very paranoid.
Put the cover over the TV still does not
heard.
make sense to me. Hey, Positively Parker, how you doing? Good to see you.
They all believed that, right? They all believed that they could be being listened to. And it turns out later they were being listened to, right? So, but the efforts that they went to try to throw the recordings so that we thought that they didn't do this, right? Like with the gun list, right? The gun list is a wish list. We don't really own an SKS or a 1911-22, those sorts of things, right? And we know that both he and George participated in those
Coolest.
things, conversations in the truck, conversations on the phone, etc. And up at the border, that we were supposed to say that we were all having a family night, we were watching a movie, we were up late, except Jake told you he forgot what the movie was. He told the wrong movie. But they had these canned responses, right? These alibi. It's an alibi, right? It's an alibi for each other. They were trying to alibi each other. And George was involved in that as well. George told people not to talk to us. Told Chris not to talk to us. Don't talk to them anymore. Told them they didn't have to show up on the for a grand jury subpoena. And he knew
That's terrible legal advice, George.
Told us that he's a Glock guy. That he got a 40 Glock. That probably made George mighty nervous. And we know he was involved in the cover-up of the custody documents too, right? Because we have a phone conversation between Angela and Rita. This is a 2017 conversation where she is saying, remember, Mom, George stopped over and told you that we just recently did that in April because the kids wanted it updated. And so they just put the old dates on, the original dates on, but that's all on a recording. So we know that George is involved in trying to cover that up too.
There you go.
So
Let's
again,
get it, tie him in.
That Jake tells us are corroborated.
Could I see Counselor?
Yeah.
All right, that's it for, let me make sure. Okay, that's it for this part.
Ladies and gentlemen, we're going to take a lunch break at this time.
Thank you, Judge Steering. All right, we're almost through it, you guys. We are almost through it. This next part is an hour and 37 minutes, but I don't think that it's I don't think the whole thing is like talking or whatever. Do you know what I'm saying? I honestly don't know that I should be talking right now because I'm clearly having a moment where it's not working out so well for me. All right, let me get over to this. Oh my, how are closed captionings not available? What the frack? This is so upsetting to me. Law and crime.
One other thing that I wanted to remind regarding the silencer that we pulled out of the well, we also pulled out the tool ammo from there that matched the SKS at 762 by 39 EMO. So just reminding, since it's been such a long trial and so many pieces of evidence.
Thank you for reminding us. Oh,
And I said the one call that I wanted you to listen to, that is quadruple I-23A. So you'll remember that. But again, it's call number 502. Okay, so we were talking about Jake's statement and
hold on a minute now.
what we learned from his statement.
Miss Canepa, this is your last, well, you get another crack at it on rebuttal, but for all intents and purposes, this is your last time to speak to the jury. It's probably not a good idea to insult them by saying you probably won't remember. See, now if I were sitting, I'm a regular person. I'm the type of person that qualifies for jury duty, and I would feel I'm not going to lie, I would feel some type of way. You probably won't remember that. As if maybe I wouldn't remember it, like just remember it out of my brain, but I probably took notes on it. All right, let's see. Remember, guys, to get this far, many intelligent professional on the state side have decided 100% guilty. They are the professionals. Just my opinion. By George. I 100% believe that George Washington Wagner IV is guilty. What I do think that the state put on enough evidence between Jake's testimony about the footprints or the shoe prints and blood, about what size shoe he wore, and then they have the video from Walmart of Angela. They have the video from the parking lot at Walmart with everybody being in the vehicle waiting for Angela while she was inside of the Walmart. They have the receipt. They have good evidence, but this would be the time to this is when you want to remind the jury of the really pertinent evidence against George, because there is so much evidence in this case. I mean, they are into the triple letters. Know what I'm saying? So I just hope that the jury, when they go back and they do their deliberations, they remember the parts to review the parts of the evidence relative to George. If they would listen to George's testimony, both on direct and cross, and listen to all of the audio from the wiretaps and from the car being bugged and whatnot, if they would listen to that, it would be very much easier for them to put, to see it the way it should be seen, which is that he is guilty.
And I already witness, and again, that is no matter what witness they are. And one of the things, again, is
I'll look it up.
The tests include the appearance of each
Jen.
witness upon the stand, the witness's manner of testifying, the reasonableness of the testimony, the opportunity the witness had to see, hear, and know the things about which they testified, the witness's accuracy of memory, frankness, or lack of it, intelligence, interest, and bias, together with all the facts and circumstances surrounding the testimony. And then you assign whatever weight you think is appropriate to each witness. And again, it says the testimony of one witness, if believed by you, is sufficient to prove any disputed fact. So again, I would just ask you to apply those tests when you're looking at both Jake and Angela's testimony in this case. And ask yourself, what motives would they possibly have to lie on their son and on their brother? It gets them nowhere. Why would you take down a perfectly innocent relative of yours that you were obviously so close to? I mean, when we listened to those 2018 recordings, you could tell that George and Angela are the ones that are really leading the charge and are in sync with one another. So again, there'd be no reason for her to make this up. But they didn't. You know, what they told us was the truth, as horrific and as disturbing and disgusting as the truth is. Let's focus then on George's testimony. Again, I told you, you will be instructed that because Jake and Angela are accomplices, that you are to regard their testimony with grave suspicion. And you'll simply be instructed that you are to weigh the defendant's testimony the way you would weigh anybody else's testimony. I would submit to you that you should weigh his testimony with grave suspicion, because he had nothing but self-serving testimony. Opening statement to things he said at the border, to things he said on the wire, and certainly the things he said on the stand when he testified in front of you. And what is his motive? He did not, right? Well, we know at the border it was to protect himself and his family. They had all had that same alibi. That was to protect his right. Obviously, he told you that he knows that if he comes in here and says he committed these crimes, that you're going to find him guilty and that he will face a severe penalty. He told you that anybody who does that should get the death penalty, right? And up until today, he was facing the death penalty, but because his brother lived up to his end of the bargain and came in here.
You want to approach?
Hang on, I'm looking this up for Jen about where the I don't want to watch it. If I wanted to watch, I wouldn't have. I would just go to YouTube. I just want to read. Trying to. I. All right, let's see. I don't want to watch a video.
This is counsel's argument for each side, and each side is given a fair opportunity to make argument, but the argument itself is not evidence. You rely on your own, you rely on collective memories for what the evidence is. All right, you may continue.
As you know, the defendant is no longer facing death penalty in his case. And obviously that was not pursuant to anything he did. But even though he's not facing the death penalty, he understands that if he's convicted of the remaining charges and specifications, he still faces a potentially very severe punishment. You guys will no longer take part in that process as we drug you through all the individual ones here and talked to you about that process. I think we did also tell you that there's a possibility that that would not happen. So you will be instructed that you cannot consider punishment when you are making the decision about guilt during this, during your deliberations, which frankly would have been the same case anyhow, because it was a two-part phase previously when there was death penalty as a potential, because you first decide whether or not somebody's guilty and then you decide what the penalty is. Regardless, the defendant understands that if he's found guilty, he probably will not see the light of day for a long time at least. And we also know that what his mantra is, right? In that same call, or in a call with his mother, he apologizes to his mother and says, don't get mad at me, but the only reason you and dad ever got into any trouble is because somebody always caves and somebody always crumbles. And I'm not going to cave. I'm not going to crumble. That's what he told you. That's what he told us on the recording. That is the way he conducts himself. When he's faced with an investigation or suspicion, he's not caving. He's not crumbling. So let's talk about not just the lies that he told, but why he told those lies.
Hey, Bethy Cakes.
And
Okay,
that
I'm going to
undoes
answer Jen's
Angela.
question. They came from Pike County. That's where the jury, because they initially filed, Georgia's attorneys initially filed venue because obviously this is what Mr. Parker, who is to the right of George. He said, this is obviously one of the highest profile cases in the history of this community. It was a 2.5-year investigation. There were news conferences, local sheriff, different members of law enforcement updating the community on the status of the investigation, defense attorney John Parker said. This was subject to great social media discussion in the community. Every pretrial, including this one, is broadcast live on the internet. It's garnered tremendous media attention. It is our position a jury couldn't be selected here that is fair to our client, given all the publicity and notoriety of this case, said Parker. The defense learned for the first time in talking recently with the jury commissioner that there is a very low turnout rate in Pike County. Approximately 20 to 25% turnout is typical of those summoned for jury duty. That is simply not acceptable if we are going to have a fair cross-section of the community. And when you factor in how notorious this case is, and if you combine with how turnout, of course we don't know until people show up or don't show up, said Parker. Judge Randy Deering denied the request for a change of venue, but says it remains to be seen whether or not we can seat a jury. And that was written May 3rd. So I'm guessing and I'm like push play. We don't need to be. Hold on.
He does not have Jake's proffer. Jake does not have her proffer. The defendant certainly does. That's part of discovery. He's got to have it. He tells you, or you were told in opening statements. Now, opening statements are not evidence. Just as closing arguments are not evidence. But you were told in opening statements that Frankie is his best friend. And he repeated that on the stand for you too. We know that's not true. So why? Why does he want you to believe that he and Frankie are best friends? Well, because he thinks that that's compelling, that Frankie's my best friend. Surely I wouldn't have participated in it. I know the absurdity of that, right? Because first of all, Billy and Chris, best friends, right? Actual, possible best friends, at least saw each other a lot. Whereas we know that the defendant acknowledged at the border that Frankie turned 16, he and the defendant drifted apart. Those were his words, drifted apart. Not we're still best friends. It was drifted apart. We also know there's a 4.5-year age difference between the defendant and Frankie. We also know that Frankie turned 16 in 2012. That's 4 years prior to that. So again,
I'm going to
the
say
veracity of that statement that he is best friends.
Mark.
He indicated that he had never met Hannah Hazel. He didn't know the name. He didn't know River's name, the name of Frankie's youngest son. So again, how good friends are you if you don't even know somebody you've been with for at least 15 months, right? And you also heard from Chelsea that there was a rift between them because
I think
George
it's going to be
reached out to
6 to
Chelsea.
8 hours. I think they're going to take the day.
And he admitted on the stand that there are no phone messages to be found, no Facebook messages to be found between them. He, of course, denies knowing or actually being the one that blocked Frankie on Facebook, but the fact remains Frankie is blocked on the defendant's Facebook. So again, not only did he lie, but why is he lying? Again, because he thinks if he can convince you that Frankie was his best friend, that there's no way he could be a suspect in this. He also told you that he ran away when he was 16.
They did take the death penalty off the table, so that might make it easier for them. I don't know.
Who he recognizes as terrible. He wants no part of it.
I'll know better after I hear the jury
Again, let's line that
instructions.
up with what we know to be true. First of all, his version of running away is mom about it. They didn't ask Jake about it. They didn't ask Chris Newcomb about it. They didn't ask the pastor about it. Nobody else on the planet says that George ran away when he was 16. But the running away involved him driving, and he didn't have enough money for gas or enough gas in the tank, and he turned around and came back. I can't imagine that there are too many of us sitting here that have not tried something similar where you run away from home because you're upset with your parents. He didn't say he was upset with them because of the terrible things they were doing with their life. It was because they were telling him to stop doing terrible things with his life because he was out all night doing things. And he didn't like to be told not to do those things. Trying to get away ever since, that's just malarkey. I mean, that's true.
Yes, tell it.
They bought Peterson Road together. They moved to Alaska together. Both of those homes were in George's name. They tried to go to Missouri together. That was George's time. George
Malarkey. Yes, ma'am.
Missouri when he thought that they could get jobs there and find a place to live until the loan fell through. And then they moved to Ohio together. They worked together every step of the way. You heard that Jake and George worked together in Alaska. Of the garage there, Buddy's garage, wrote identical language.
Yes, that's another thing. Okay, so remember how George has been, doing, I was distancing myself, blah, 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 right? Okay, well, she brought this up this morning, but I forgot about it till just right now. One of the important elements to proving that they worked and functioned as a unit, the brothers, because that's important. And because remember how much disdain George had when he testified, the way he spoke about his brother, they weren't close, they didn't do anything, yada, yada, yada. Well, Jake had started recording just the audio of the times when there would be, he would be picking up Sophie from Hannah's. And guess who was with him in the truck? That's right, George. You can hear him in the audio. And that's important. So all of those are the little details that she should be like going over. So if I'm remembering it, I think I might have a little more faith that the jury will remember it too. Because see, I can get up from listening to testimony and go have a cig, which is important. Bless these jurors' hearts. They can't. They got to sit it through till they call for a break.
Regarding Jake too, what a great worker he was.
Oh, thank you, Turtle Dove. I'm glad you like it.
We have him telling his mother on recording that he wants to move out
That
west.
sounds good.
With her and Jake and the kids, someplace far away.
Oh,
where
I
they
want
can just
to
live peacefully with one another.
put something
So
in the
again,
chat
the
for you
idea
guys.
That he's been trying to get away from them
Since
ever since he turned 16.
December is around the corner. I would love for you to please consider
Why
a
is he lying?
membership.
Again, because he's got to put some distance between him and the other two that have confessed, right? He can't be associated with them anymore because otherwise you might think that he participated.
And if a membership isn't up your alley,
He wasn't disgusted with them in any way. You heard that he continued his life
There we
of
go.
crime, and in fact was again proud of himself. In 2016, September of 2016, 5 months after these homicides occurred, when Jake and Chris wrecked his vehicle to get money. So again, it's not that he
yes. Also, what Mark said.
recognized
Thank
the
you very
error of
much.
his life and the life of crime that his family was leading. That was not the case at all. He also said in opening statements that Jake was the favorite child. And again, we know that he did not say that at the board. I asked him about that when he was on the stand. And his response to the agents, and again, was that his mom has never given him a reason to think that Jake is the favorite child. So again, why does he want you to think that? Because then maybe that makes it more likely that Jake and Angela were in on something that he was cut out of.
Also, and I hope she points this out too. If we are to believe George's testimony under direct, where the way he thought of his mother, that she was too opinionated, that she was manipulative, that she favored Jake over George, that she was essentially viewed Bullvine and Sophia as mulligans, like a do-over with, to do things that correctly this time, things that she felt she did wrong with George, right? Why would you let if this is also you under Chris Roden Sr.'s tutelage and your Uncle Chris, you recognize that this is a life of crime, this is no good, yada, 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 right? Why would you leave your son? If something happened to you, you would rather have the criminal enterprise that is your mother and father raising your son than anybody else on the planet. That's another thing that never made sense to me, but here we go.
Even the Andrew Carson call, you heard that this was like the performance of a century that Jake did. Well, I think Andrew Carson said he dropped the phone, and there was no indication that George was present during that. That's not come fair. So again, just these things that
Turtle boy.
put out there
Turtle,
that are not.
I actually think I want to be on jury duty. Watch, I'll say that until
Let's talk about
if
the
I
lies
ever
that
get
were told
called
before.
or
And
picked.
we know why he's lining up
And then
the
I'll
corner,
be like,
right?
how do I get out of
Because
it?
at that time, they're all denying. They're all going to alibi each other, and they're all going to convince us that none of them are guilty because nobody has turned state's evidence at that point. So that is when we had a family night until 12 or 12:30. My son usually goes to bed around 12:30. My very young son goes to bed at 12:30. Goes to bed
Poppycock.
for an hour, then he gets up to have apple juice. We watched the fairy movie. It was Sophia's pick. You have to watch it. They all had to stay awake for it because if you don't watch it, you twist your ear. So again, a very elaborate lie, but we know it's a lie because at a minimum, Jake wasn't sitting there at 12:30 watching a movie because we know the three of them, Jake, George, and Billy, were up on Union Hill Road killing Chris and Gary just before 11 p.m. when Chris's phone is seen calling Billy's phone. And we also know that that was the lie, right? That was the ultimate lie. That was the alibi lie. And it was to protect himself and his family. He said he never saw those shoes before, even though his mom admitted that she bought them for them, that they saw them, that they didn't like them. But he denies it. And that's mostly because he wasn't prepared for that question. Like I said, they knew we had metal detectors out there. There were media helicopters up there. They told you that. And
I wonder
none of
why
them were
she
ready for
kept
that
the
question.
receipt for
But
those
again,
shoes.
George just went with his normal approach, which is deny, deny, deny.
And
Because
here's what
everything
this is my other thing about those shoes. Because I've been thinking about this. Mainly when I take a shower. That's when I do all my important thinking. Okay. Canepa has said repeatedly that Angela Wagner was not prepared for the shoe question, right? But on some level, she had to be. First of all, it was a game that the family played about spotting the security cameras, right? Everybody and their dog knows that there are security cameras all over Walmart, on the inside of Walmart and the outside of Walmart. Now, so on some level, she had to know that when she bought those shoes, right, that she would be captured on video, both inside the store and outside of the store, at the bare minimum at the register. Okay. So, how could she not be prepared for that question? How could she not be? Because whether they had found that receipt or not, right? They were looking for those specific shoes. And they were looking for those shoes sold during a specific time period. So inevitably, in that search alone, she would have come up. So why keep the receipt unless you were prepared to explain it? It's just a shitty explanation. That's what I think. She was prepared. She just wasn't well prepared, as it were. Her explanation is caca. All right, here we go.
was great between Hannah and Jake. That's what he said at the border. Again, that is all to protect them. He knew that wasn't the case, but he said that it was so that we would believe that there was no motive at all for anybody in the family to have committed this offense. He said his family, and specifically his dad, was not involved in any of the drug operations, drug grows, drug trafficking, drug anything with Chris Sr., that he did not know about it. Again, he gave a very elaborate lie and said, if we would have known about it, why would we not have just snitched on Chris? Okay, and this is, you're being confronted with, you killed the rodents, you had a motive, blah, blah, blah. He's trying to convince us there is no motive, he's not involved with the drugs. And if we were aware of the drugs, why wouldn't we have just snitched on him? Which is kind of an odd thing to say, first of all, because it admits that you have some axe to grind with them, but also, again, that was the original plan. The original plan was to snitch on Chris. So he told on himself without realizing it, because at the time at the border, again, they were all lockstep. They weren't caving, they weren't crumbling. Nobody was going to tell what actually happened. So he was comfortable saying that, right? Now, it's a very telling thing for him to say, because we heard from Angela Wagner that that was actually the original plan, that he comes up with that at the border. He says his mom is not controlling at the border. Again, I talked about that, where we were accusing her of masterminding this. So again, he comes to her defense. She's not controlling. Jake and I run the store, or run the house. Either way, every lie that he told us at the border was to protect himself and Jake and Billy.
Actually, I don't think that part was a lie. And here's why. Because there's also audio of a phone call between Jake and Angela, wherein Angela says, essentially, you and your brother, and she keeps calling him Jacob, you and your brother have done 90% of the planning in this family. I have let you guys run the show for far too long. I'm not sure how to answer this. I'm not a lawyer. So there are times when I will, it's not so much that I'm an observer of humans, okay, regardless of their occupation. And whenever a human being does anything clownish, I remark on it. I think that Angela is actually an incredibly intelligent woman. And I also think that she knows the law. She's not playing around here. It's just that I'm not oh, thank you, Turtle Dove. Thank you so much. It's just that I feel like her strong suit is not opening or closing statements or arguments. You know what I'm saying? There are some lawyers that are just really good at it. Where her strong suit is, in my opinion, is raising objections, responding to objections, showing case law where respective to specific evidence being admitted or not admitted or what have you. She knows the law. She's incredibly intelligent. I think she's actually a good lawyer. I just don't think that her strong suit is in opening or closing arguments. Yes, you've got to be heads up in the Floridas, because you just never know when the most calm, seems like they're minding their own business, not given a single F, and they're lottie-dying around, is going to just twist off and go completely batshit crazy. That's Florida. I'm telling you.
And Angela, they were protecting each other. There were other interesting things that we learned at the border. And again, I talked to him about this, that he said that they make decisions as a family. He indicated that he wasn't 100% sure that he was going to go back to Alaska because he hadn't talked to the family yet. So again, clearly they make decisions as a family. And he's not even prepared to give an answer until he's had that discussion with his family.
Yes.
He also gave us very vivid details about his grandfather and his condition, where he only had a year to live in his spine. This is the one that's paralyzed since age 17. And that comes back again once he takes the stand. And again, he goes overboard, stressing that his mom
Also,
lives with him and not the other way around.
I would just like to point out too that on some level, I can kind of identify with Angela Canepa here, because there have been times when I've written notes about cases and I'll be referring to my notes and I'll be reading them and realize, what the hell was I just trying to write here, or what's this connected to? Like it's an abrupt stop in the notes. And I think that's what happened just now to her. So now I'm sort of feeling like a little kinship with her.
So then we get to the lies he told us when we were listening to him, right? And he knew we were listening to him. He knew so much that we
I
were listening
swear
to him,
that
so
public
I know he
subline,
listened
but
to
let
us,
me
why?
just say this.
I am being special.
Excuse me, Miss Canepa. If you guys have an occasion to be anywhere where there is a Publix grocery store, so like Georgia, Florida, I forget where else they have them, but I know for sure Georgia and Florida have the Publix. You must get a pub sub. Most all of them are good. I like the chicken tender one. That's my fave. But you also must go past the pub sub line over to where the fruit is and look for the Publix fruit bowls. I'm telling you guys, Dr. B did not understand how much fuss I made over these dadgum Publix fruit bowls until she had a Publix fruit bowls. And once you've had a Publix fruit bowl, no other fruit bowl will ever be the same. It ruins you for life, because I'm telling you, they are assembled in heaven by literal angels. Okay.
So he knew that. And you heard Jake and Angela say that they would try to grow the conversation so that we wouldn't hear anything incriminating. And in fact, hopefully hear something that was somewhat exculpatory. The gun list, again, we talked about this. Why is that important? That we think that gun list is a wish list.
I'll be right
The
back.
SKS then is in his hands. And one of the other murder weapons is also on that list. He also continues to go to some length saying that Jake did not even have a 1911. And again, this is important to convince us, because not only does he know they were used in the homicides, but if we don't think it's a wish list, if we think it's actually an inventory, then where is the 1911, right? They need to hand it over to us and say, go ahead, test fire it. You're not going to find anything because this is not the gun that did it. Same with the SKS. They no longer have it because they destroyed it. You saw, they destroyed it. So again, he goes overboard trying to convince us that this is a wish list. He says it, I think, about 5 times in that one conversation. Again, the lie is to protect himself and his family. The custody documents, again, we learned in the recordings that he reminded Rita about, how these were re-upped in April. And he also tried to convince us that Jake never owned a 1911 22. And again, that's something that we'll come back to when we talk about the lies he told us on the stand. So I would say the first kind of pack of lies is the I don't remember, right? There were times where I would ask him, well, at the border, though, you said that your grandfather was very ill and that you didn't know he only had a year to live. And he gave great detail, great specifics on his spine rotting and graphic and gruesome details. But he couldn't remember that. He couldn't remember that. There were many of those things that when it contradicted something that he had said on the stand, he couldn't remember. And again, the reasonableness of that. He sat here this whole trial, listening to all the evidence. He certainly has access to his statement that he made at the border. Again, the reasonableness that he has not refreshed his memory with that statement. And again, some of the things that he remembered verbatim, but then couldn't remember. He told you that he went to bed on the stand. He said he went to bed at 10 p.m. Well, that's a 2.5 hour difference from what he said at the border, right? Why did it change? Well, we know why, right? Because if he was awake until 12:30, he would have had to see Jake and Billy leave, and he can no longer say that he didn't know what happened. So now he's saying he was lights out at 10 p.m. Of course, he also is the same person and then slept in until 8 or 9 the next morning. I want you to remember, this is the same guy that bragged to us about how he lives on 1 or 2 hours of sleep a night, right? I mean, he drives and then he hunts all night or scraps all day, and literally said that he was living off of 1 and 2 hours of sleep a night. Yet he wants you to believe that he went to bed at 10 o'clock and then get up until 8 or 9 the next day. That's more than 10 hours of sleep that night. Suddenly, it goes from 12:30 to 10 p.m. Again, because he can't put himself as being awake at the time. Of course, that lie doesn't work either, right? You're asleep at 10 o'clock or you go to your bed at 10 o'clock, you don't fall asleep right away. He also told us he has a habit of Facebooking for about an hour when he goes to bed. He also says his son gets up an hour later, so he, presumably would have gotten up. He also tells you that there's no way anybody could leave the house without him knowing. That he admitted that he said that at the border at least 15 times. That there's no way anybody could have left that night without him knowing. No way. But now he wants you to believe that that's exactly what happened. That he just dove into bed, went immediately to sleep, and is oblivious. And so that gave Jake and Billy, presumably, less than an hour to get out to the barn. So they would have had to just, as soon as he shut his door, just, run out to the barn and get in the truck and go up there. So again, why does he change that lie? Why does he lie about that? Because at this point, he's no longer protecting his family. He's just trying to protect himself. He said that he did give his dad the money to buy the truck off of Uncle Toddy, but then Chris Sr. came and got it, or he drove off with it, and he never saw it again after that. Never saw it again after that. What I would say to that is, boy, is Angela a lucky guesser, right? What a lucky, lucky guesser that she says that they bought this truck to use it that night too, and that they parked it up by the barn. She just somehow or other knew about this truck, again, without knowing ever what Jake said. But, and says that George is the one that got the money for the truck, but he says the truck just disappears. And again, you have the undisputed testimony of Katie Wagner that Billy drives up with that truck early morning hours. And you've been on that property, you know if that truck is parked up by that barn, you're going to see it because it's not that far from the house. He tells us on the stand that the lies at the border, he said, I admit I lied. I lied to BCI agents at the border, not to protect myself, not to protect my family, but to protect Hannah and her family from the rumors. Because on Facebook and topics, there's terrible rumors going around about them about these drug operations, right? Well, again, how do we know that's a lie? Because he didn't say the Rodins weren't involved in drugs. He said his dad and he, the rest of the family, didn't know about the Rodins drugs. He knows we're up there. He knows we've done searches of the property. He knows we've discovered any marijuana grows, any marijuana that's there. So him saying that his family doesn't know about it doesn't protect Hannah or her family whatsoever. But of all the things he can remember, he remembers telling that lie, and he remembers why. Again, it's just not the truth. At the time, he was trying to convince us the family was not involved in drugs because he knew that was a possible motive. He does read the Facebook topics, and he did know that we looked into anybody who, had any drug dealings with them. So again, that was just a lie that he told to protect his family. And here in front of you, he lied to you and said it was to protect Hannah. The biggest, however, and most important lie that he told you was about that gun show. And I said it earlier in my closing, January 31st of 2015 was an important date. That was the time when we first have a picture of that 19/11/22 on Jake's phone. And then later, a few months later, we have it in his hand, right? January 31st of 2015 is when the gun show happened at the Westland Mall. And we know the defendant freely admits that he was at that gun show. Well, he freely admits it because we had some documents to hand him that have his signature and say the Westland Mall and shows a gun that he bought there, Kel-Tec. His memory is so good that he remembers going to that gun show with his dad and buying that gun for his dad. In fact, that's why they went to the gun show, just to get that gun. But for the life of him, he cannot remember Jake being there with him, even though we know that Jake was there at the gun show with him.
They literally did everything together.
In
Stop.
1911-22.
Yeah, George,
That is
you need to stop playing with
trial
these people.
of the 8 victims in this case. So again, ask yourselves, why that lie?
Because
Because
George
he spent
is
so
a
much time
liar.
on those recordings trying to convince us there wasn't a 1911-22. Jake never owned that. And that the gun list isn't real. The gun list, being made in February of 2015, within a few weeks of them buying these guns. Because he knows that makes him look guilty. So he cannot admit that he was there, or Jake was there, and he remembers Jake being there buying that 1911 that later becomes the murder weapon. And, if you don't know the significance of the 1911, if you weren't with Jake and Billy up there on Union Hill Road, why, when Agent Scheider sends a text to George with that 1911-22, with parts that we saw them purchasing, to build the silencer, why is that a family emergency? Would have it been a family emergency if he sent a picture of the Caltech, which wasn't used in the homicide? Of course not. Who cares? You're sending me a picture of a gun. It has no meaning to me. Why is he sending me a picture of this gun? All he said, and you'll have the text messages, was, I'd like to talk to you about this sooner rather than later. That's it. He didn't say this is a murder weapon, nothing. But that became a family emergency. On the stand, he wants to convince you that it was Jake's family emergency. But George is the one on the phone, and again, we'll have these recordings.
There you go, Angela. Now you're tying it together. Excellent. Good job.
So they can go home. Again, there's
I'm glad I waited to watch it with
so
you
that's a family
guys.
emergency unless you know.
Because then I would have spoiled it
Because you were there at the
accidentally,
1911
not intentionally. No malice. No malicious.
And again, it's indisputable evidence that they all three were at that gun show. But again, the reasonableness of what he says to you. The guns are all stored in the same safe at their house in the mudroom. Never saw the gun there. He says he never saw the gun.
Everything is in that mudroom.
You go to the gun
Angela
shop,
does
you
all
buy
of her lectures in the mudroom.
You talk about them,
She-
you
when
hand to them, they handle them.
They
you look
found
at
out
them,
about
in 1911-22.
Angela was in the mudroom. Does she live in the mudroom? The guns are in the mudroom.
So, again, there's no question.
They're getting all the use out of that mudroom. Faux show.
But he's lying to you. And again, the why he's lying is clear. But at some point, the fact that all he does is lie in his opening, at the border,
You're right.
on the wire when he thought we were listening, and here on the stand has to matter. That has to matter. That he does nothing but tell lies.
Yes, George is definitely a lying
Because
liar,
sometimes
mouth
it's
who
not the
tells
favorite.
lies.
Chris Newcomb says it is. He says he's like a brother. You heard how close they are. Chris Newcomb says it's his favorite movie. Miranda says she was there when that conversation happened, and she didn't know what the Boondock Saints movie was about, so she asked him. And when she found out that it was two brothers, it was a movie about two brothers, she said, oh, well, no wonder they both like it. No wonder it's their favorite movie or whatever, because Jake also said it was his favorite movie.
It's an absolutely excellent movie. The
doesn't
first
want
one
you to
is
think
better
that's
than the
favorite movie?
second one. I strongly
Well,
urge
just a
everybody
little
to
bit.
check it out.
A little bit more evidence in your minds that he was involved in these murders.
Although I
And
will
Angela
say,
says that they would quote that movie.
I've quoted that movie several times. I will say this about Boondock Saints 1 and, number 2. Although I am a fan of the first one because William Dafoe is in it, and it's just, I don't know, it's better. I liked the first one better. The second one is a very, very good movie. It just has some parts in it where you're just like, ugh.
Etc.
I was telling y'all to go check it. You should check them out, both of them.
And again, I think that you will be instructed that you can choose to believe all of what somebody says, some of what somebody says on the witness stand, or none of what they say on the witness stand. And I would suggest to you that that is what you should do regarding the defendant's testimony. I think you should disregard all of it.
All of it? What about on cross? I mean, you did catch him in some lies on cross. Maybe not all of it, but okay. I take your
You're also
meaning.
supposed to look at the demeanor in which he testifies, his frankness or lack thereof. Again, just things that were noticeable. You know, he talked about how Jake and Angela thought they were better than everybody else.
Mhm.
But it seemed pretty clear that George thought he was certainly better than them. I think that was pretty clear from his testimony.
That's a good point.
You know, he tells you things like that last fire up on Bethel Hill, I didn't want any part of. I told them not to do it, but I knew they were going to do it, so I just went along with it and got my stuff out, etc. Why would he suddenly not want to do that? They're taking the money to buy a new
Sean
car.
Patrick Flannery or Norman Reedus or both?
Why suddenly is he just, again, wants to convince you of that? Even though he freely admits that he engaged another insurance fraud after this. Again, it's because
Who is shuffling all this paperwork over here? Can y'all hear that?
and his accomplices in this case. You know, I already talked about the reasonableness of the fact that, you know, he told his mom to stop stalking Tabitha, even though the threat of her getting bovine started raising its head again 2 months after the disillusion was final. He said,
Okay,
before the
Turtle.
disillusion was final, he told him this out. Again, the reasonableness of that, it makes no sense. The fact he says that he was not aware of any rift between Hannah and Jake, but then you hear from Angela, who again says that not only do they have family meetings, but sometimes if they're, you know, talking in one room and somebody else, you know, everybody weighs in on, right? I mean, this is how they spend their time.
Yeah, everything's a
She tells
committee
me
meeting.
Specifically, that she had a talk with Jake and George about whether they were okay with this, and we talked about that. And she said that they said yes, they had to do this in order to protect.
Yes,
So
Turtle Dove, they are. Norman and Sean Patrick Flannery are both of them
When
are
he
hot.
says he never knew their
Absolutely.
plan,
Even Billy Connolly
again,
is
this
good
is-
looking
this would be
in
the one time,
both those.
all the way leading up to it. He's intimately involved in every ordeal, everything that goes on in the house, and all the way after it, he is. And also, I would like you to lay those comments next to him talking
Mark.
about having to discuss it with his family.
He doesn't
Saying
want
Jake and his
bovine.
family
He
would
doesn't
be
want
Telling Jake
bovine's
that
bills
Sophia
going
was
to
being
him
killed.
or
versus
his
Jake
bills
because
going to
he has-
bovine. That's why he named him that and didn't name him George V. Yeah, bovine, bless his heart. He's never going to be able to get a license plate
And again, just
for his bike at
Walmart.
Walmart with that name.
She talked about the security system, and what did she tell you about the security system? She tells you that the security system.
We don't know because we didn't get to
They all
hear
three
it.
put it up, that they bought it. And then Billy came over and saw the security system and said, that is a really dumb thing, because that's going to catch us coming and going when we commit these homicides. And so the security system came down, and the last she saw it was sitting in a box, and we all know that it ends up getting burnt. That is far more reasonable and rational than the story that George tells you about that security system. Because
Turtle
he tells you the security system goes to his grandpa. Then how does that DVR end up burned in the burn pile at Peterson Road? If it's at his grandfather's, like they go in. No sense.
No, you're right. That makes no sense.
She also confirms that Jake and George dyed their hair that week. The one thing that they have failed to do, when the defendant took the stand, we can very easily demonstrate his lies. I've just walked through some of those with you, whether it's because it changed from what he said at the border, whether he simply just said things that are unsupported by facts and in fact contradicted by facts. But they have not proven that anything that Jake or Angela said was a lie. There's been nothing that contradicts them. In fact, again, they're consistent with one another. And so not giving you any motive why they would come in here and lie to you at the defendant if he's perfectly innocent in this case. Frankly, the defendant himself
Bowling.
vouches for the credibility of Jake, right? I mean, he talked about the fact that Jake's honesty has always gotten him in trouble. He did not say his lies get me in trouble.
No.
He did not say you're always lying on me.
What he said was
That
Jake
never came out of his
snitching,
mouth, not on the
tattletaling,
recordings and not on the
got him in trouble. That's what he
it's
said.
Honesty that gets us in trouble because he'd always confess to mom or dad when they did something they weren't supposed to do. He'd go do it with them, but then he would come back and tell, and they'd get in trouble. And he specifically said he was upset with him for not destroying the laptop the laptop that we see all the screenshots on, the custody document print spool, the Google searches for Sally Catcher, the lots and lots of evidence. And Jake's phone has the gun list. The laptop has the backups that have the 1911-22 in Jake's hand. So, but then he comes in here and tells you, well, that's because I thought that you were framing him or some such thing. Again, he knew full well the damaging nature of all those items.
I mean, it is preposterous to believe he was aware of all of their criminal
The
activity
one thing
aside from this
that
one
we
time.
did not hear from the stand, again, that I thought was very telling. Mr. Parker asked him, "You found out that your brother confessed to doing these crimes. What did you think?" Mr. Parker kind of fed him the answer and said, "Did you feel like Chris Newcomb felt?" What he did not hear George say, he did not say, "Well, yeah, I would like to strangle him with my bare hands for lying on me." Like, he didn't say anything, nothing from the stand about being upset that Jake lied on him or his mom lied on him.
That's a good
I've
point.
not been in that position, but I can't imagine that that would not be my overwhelming emotion I would feel when I found out that not only did my brother confess, but now he's saying I was involved too and I wasn't even there. What in the world?
What's your objection? For the love of Pete, it's closing arguments. Stop
So
it.
again, the reasonableness of what he says.
How much longer do you got, Angela?
He also says that he now believes that Jake and his mother were involved in it.
Oh, this is all the description.
But again,
We're not going to watch all of this.
because according to Jake, George was right there with him. According to Jake,
Yeah, that's not going to happen.
and drove up there
She's almost.
in that. And that George had the SKS, and the plan was for him to shoot Chris in the head, for George to do that. How can he believe anything that Jake is saying if those are lies? If those are lies.
I mean, she's making some really good points. It's just that the pauses and this.
I'm going to go through the charges with you.
Okay.
This during open
We won't be going through
a
those
little
charges
bit,
with you
know
as
what kind of
well.
Evidence to look for, but now that we're at the end of the trial and you've seen all the evidence.
Yeah. We're not gonna go over those with you, Angela. You'll be doing that with the jury on your own because I can't do that. I'm not going to do that to you guys. It's too much. So that's what she spends the next 45 minutes or so going over, which for the jury's purposes, it's important. Okay. Obviously, they need to understand the charges and she needs to direct them to the evidence that she feels the state has presented that support those charges. That's important. We, on the other hand, did not take an oath. So we don't have to participate in that. I will agree with that, Mark. You're 100. I can't highlight that because I don't know. You know how YouTube gets with the word DEAD. You know how they be acting. Anyway, I agree with you. 8. And this was, yeah. They've okay. So today was 39. All right. Were present. And there was another time where the jury wasn't present. So I think 4 days total, which brings it to 45 days of trial. But they spent, I believe it was, No, you're fine. No, it's not. No, you can write it in the chat. I just can't highlight it. I never know what YouTube is funky that way, and they crack down really hard on true crime content. I mean, they're just ridiculous. So don't ever be sorry. No, it's fine. I just can't highlight it. Do 45 3 days. So five of actual trial, and then there were 3 days of them touring the sites, and then they went to where the trailer stored. So altogether, 48 days that they've, spent listening to evidence, viewing evidence, and it's an incredibly complicated case. I do agree with the way that they present it very, very meticulously and methodically. And it with the day of the crime and coming out to the crime scene and the victims and photographing and then the autopsies and the way that they went through it, each crime scene and the victims at the separate crime scenes together, doing it like that. That was a smart play to do. I 100% agree with that. I just feel like there were parts of the closing and opening, really, which I don't know if the opening, the amount of stuff that the opening included, some of that I feel like, especially with respect to Jake and Angela, were less for the benefit of the jury because they were going to hear them testify. We were not. Maybe more for the public. I can't be sure about that. But I think for the closing, there was, see how she did it at the end where she talked about, Jake testified to this, or excuse me, George testified to this, but this is where this evidence refutes that. And, if she'd, thank you, Turtle Dove. I can't either, Amelia Sparkles. So I hope you guys will all join me tomorrow at 8:50 because this is, I am dying to see A, who does it, and B, what they say. So I just feel like there were some parts of the closing that could have been trimmed out that were unnecessary, or even could have been streamlined a little bit. It was important for her in the closing to remind the jury the dynamic in this family with respect to the women and girls, really, because Hannah and Tabby were just girls when they met George and Jake, but then they became moms, women. But and then Beth Ann, it was very important for her to remind the jury of the family dynamic of what happened. The cause of all of this really was the fact that they could not control Hannah. That's really what it was about. She wasn't going to sign the things that they wanted her to sign. She was not going to be like Tabby. And bless Tabby's heart, I think she was just quite frankly scared. And I think that she was under the impression that whatever documents that she signed, whatever she agreed to, right, was only temporary, and it could be undone, which is why I think she agreed to the things that she agreed to, but she was young. And yes, exactly. Hey, support with Steffa. There were times when she did hit her hand on the podium a few times, but I wish it would have been a few more times and at some key points. I think if I were to give her a Google rating as far as opening statement goes, I'm going to be fair and give her 3 stars, because at the very, very end, which is probably the majority of what the jury would remember, she did tie it, which is what she, so all of those times before that where they could, it's not that she shouldn't have talked about the stuff. It's just that it needed to be streamlined a little bit. Constructive criticism to her for the next case. That, because that's why she's the one trying the case, because it is such a complex case. And, but I am just dying to know. And the wait is almost over. Like 12 hours from, less than 12 hours from now, we'll be hearing the defense's closing arguments. And I'm very curious how they're going to turn this around, because I do think that in the closing argument, she did do a good job of undermining George's testimony, because there were times on that stand when George did appear credible. She did finish today's support with Steffa. That's what we just watched. And we got to the end of it. We didn't watch the whole end of it, because the whole end of it was like each charge and like what evidence supported that. And I just thought, no, we're not going to do that today. Sorry, not sorry. I forgot what I was saying before that, though. What was I saying? Oh, George on the stand. See, the part that I found interesting, and I feel that the jury might have, and remember, he only has to get one juror to believe there only needs to be one juror that has reasonable doubt. She has to get all 12. That's why I'm so critical, because she has to get 12. And that's a much bigger feat than one. And I think the part that at least one juror may have found George credible on was the fact that he would to talk about the crimes that the family had committed. And I think that Molson, how could you be back on Watts Island? Not because I'm shocked that you're back on Watts Island, but what's even going on Watts Island today? Anyway, tonight, you're not the worst mod at all. You're an excellent mod, and I appreciate you. Even if you do leave and run errands and somehow get sucked back into Watts Island, you're still an excellent mod. So I think a juror would be likely to think, well, why would he admit to crimes that he's not charged with, his family's never been charged with? And to be quite frank, some of the crimes that he admitted to, I don't even think that law enforcement was aware of. And that might cause one juror to have some amount of reasonable doubt. By the end of it, I think she did tie it together nicely. If there was one or two jurors that had some reasonable doubt going into it, she probably, I don't know if she did quite enough to completely convince them, but if they review the evidence, I think they'll get over the reasonable doubt. But yeah, so Molson, I have already told you that I would be your sponsor, but I can't be an effective sponsor if you don't proactively reach out. You can't, like, part of the element, I think, or the job or the duties, the responsibilities of you to be in a struggle. Like you're thinking about going on to Watts Island and you're like supposed to let me know, and I'm supposed to like talk you down about going to Watts Island. But I can't really do anything after the fact. You know what I'm saying? Like maybe I don't know, maybe there's a meeting. I don't know what. I don't know. But yeah. So tomorrow, excuse me, you guys. I'm sorry I didn't mean to yawn in your ear like that. Well, Molson, listen, you are the best. That's okay. Tomorrow is a new day, and with a new day comes a Watts Island free day. The hope, right? So for tomorrow, what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna stream in the morning. Obviously, I will stream at night, and that will be um covering this case. But as you can see from the title, I did at the beginning of the stream talk a little bit about the Austin Harrouf case. This case is known as the face biting case. Um, it came to a resolution today, and I want to talk a little bit about that. And I want you guys to hear I want you to hear the victim impact statement, particularly from um, the victim's the wife, it's her sister. I want you guys to hear because her victim impact statement is on fire. I mean, it's really good. Actually, I thought it was really, really good. Anyway, so we have that. And then there is a trial going on right now in my favorite place on the planet, Texas. And hey, Allie, good to see. That is a serial killer case. And I watched, before I came live tonight, I watched a little bit of the opening statements on that one. It's kind of interesting. The person that's on trial is a former, when he was committing these acts back in 2018, he was a Border Patrol agent. And so I'm curious about that case. And I know that there's other cases coming up. Remember, we still have the Sheila Keene. That one's been on hold, but I'm thinking they've had ample time to review the clown sightings file and contact any people really in that file. I highly doubt that it's exculpatory in the way that they think it is. However, they should be afforded the opportunity. And I think enough time has passed that should be accomplished. And I would guess probably sometime in December, if not, because I haven't looked, maybe January. So yeah, don't you guys worry. Plus, I still got to do I'm not even close to being halfway done with the Dahmer series, because we're only up to when he was living at grandma's house. So there's that. I also want to remind everyone, let me put the link. Let me just do it from here. It'll be easier in the chat. So Mo, our pal, our bestie, released the jail calls part 1 between Azel Dazzle and Cat and Dulce, and they're quite interesting because these jail calls take place in September. And remember, He went on trial, January of this year, I think it was. So there's that. And, but they're very, very telling. And okay, cool, Allie. You are more than welcome to stay here and chill. I'm glad you're better break. Sad to see you're struggling a little. Okay, here is Mo's channel. If you want to go listen to those, I'm not exactly sure when she is going to release the second part of the jail calls. Yes, 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 Molson. Thank you for reminding me. Casey Anthony speaks tomorrow on Peacock. Now, I'm going to do a poll on the community tab of the channel because I am curious. I want to talk about the case. Obvious. I want to talk about the docuseries, but I want to give people who have Peacock ample time to watch, and I don't want to spoil anything. But I also know that there are people that don't want Peacock, won't get Peacock, and therefore won't be able to see it. So, oh, you're welcome, babe. Yeah, that's what this is. And then for the Amelia Sparkles in the group, people that want to talk about it but don't want to give the view. They don't want Casey making any money off of this, and I don't blame you. So I'm willing to take one for the team because that's who I am and talk about it. But I want to put a poll up to see, like, how long do you think I should wait, give people an opportunity, because my plate's pretty full. But the thing about covering trials is it's ever changing. We all totally expected there to be a trial in Florida versus Austin Harrouf, excuse me, and there wasn't. And so those kinds of things happen, and so I like to have backup topics to talk about. So I'm going to put a poll up, so be looking out for that. What else? I think that's it. I think. Yeah, I think that's it. So, yeah, I think that's all the news. Also, you guys, I have to find time in between all of this to assemble the Lego Star Wars Darth Vader head that my youngest daughter and her boyfriend got me, which was so sweet of them. I really wish that I could, if YouTube was different, I would. But I wish that I could show you guys she was equally excited, but he was more excited because, I think he wanted to impress me, which I think is adorable. And he really is a nice kid. I like him a lot. But I'm aware that he's a teenage boy, so he'd be getting the side eye regardless, just because that's how it is. But just the way he gave it to me, he was just so excited for me to have it. And it was just really sweet. And if, again, YouTube wasn't a cesspool of assholes, except for this chat, I would absolutely show it, show you guys their pictures, because they really are cute. But I've got to absolutely, Molson, man, I was over the moon for it. I was so ecstatic, and I can't wait to put it together. But time management it's one of my developing skills. I'm getting at it, but I typically am a procrastinator who then pushes myself at the very last minute to get things done, and then I'm 50% stressed out. And by the time that it's all done and I sit down, and I don't even enjoy it because of all the stress. And I've got to stop that. I've really got to. That's going to be one of those New Year's resolutions. So, which I never keep either. So this is a developing skill for your girl. I'm getting better at it. So, have some stuff with Wagner that I want to put together a couple of videos for you guys. Just just a refresher. It sort of sums up the whole case. Yeah. So it's been a long time since I've put together anything Lego related. Now, my oldest son loved the Lego sets, but he really basically liked the finished product, right? He didn't actually want to do the putting together of the Legos. He would get really frustrated. But I'm the type of mom who was like, okay, I'll help you, but I'm not going to do it for you. And yeah. So, I mean, come on, Turtle Dove. I'm not, I'm being 100 when I say that. YouTube, I like our little community. I like you guys, everybody in the chat. You guys are all really cool people. And frankly, I've said it 11 billion times and I'll say it 11 billion more. I think, in my opinion, that we have, and this is the coolest chat on these YouTube streets. Ooh, that's a good idea too, Molson, man. I do need to do another 12 days of true crime Christmas. And there's a ton of those cases. So, in fact, one of the cases that I covered in the 12 days of Christmas is featured in the Netflix show 28 Days Haunted. It comes from what are their names? Ed and Lorraine Warren. It is their son-in-law, Tony. He does it because they have this theory. The Warrens had this theory that the longer you stay in a place that has spirits, their theory is by the 28th day, the veil between this realm and the spirit realm becomes so incredibly thin that that's when you're at the most risk for being spiritually attacked or getting an attachment or whatever. But it's also the time when you can learn the most about what's going on in that particular home. It's actually a good I don't know, Sam, this is right up yours in my alley. And but yeah, I watched it and it's actually really, really good. It's okay, Molson, around day 9, absolutely. I'd be happy to do that. Absolutely. Just for you. I also have to do something for Team Psych Ward, the Netflix series, The Watcher. There is a true story behind that. And she asked me to do something, so I've got to do that too. What else do I have? I was also thinking, because I kind of want to keep, obviously, this channel for this, for true crime and court cases and stuff like that. But I do have my Jen Lu, right? And that's technically a channel. In fact, I have 18 whole subscribers on that channel. I was actually thinking about doing something like Jen Lu reviews or something like that, and just doing quickie videos on things that are new on all the different streaming services and HBO Max and stuff like that, of like shows or movies that I've watched, and if I recommend them or not. I don't know if you guys would be interested in something like that, but I've had that idea too. So yeah, like I have a ton of ideas rattling around in this noggin. It's just I need to get better at being more organized and doing it. I'm not good on the follow through sometimes. I'm not good at that. So yeah, if you guys want to, if that's something you're interested in, go sub up here. I'll drop my Jen Lu channel over up in here. And hold on a second. I don't know how to work this today for some reason. Let me put my other. Let me search myself. Oops. Everybody help if I spell my name right. Oh wow. When you search my thing on YouTube, it pulls up the word. That's cool. All right, hold on. Let me look at it this way. Here I am. All right, so then I'll put that link in the chat too, and you guys go over there and give me a sub. Aw, thank you, Molson. I appreciate that. Thank you, Amelia. Thank you, Allie. You guys are all so sweet and so supportive. But there you go. So, yeah, life does happen. But I have got, like, there's sometimes, Molson, when, yes, it's actually life. And then also sometimes it's just me fucking around. It's just the truth. I get distracted by stuff, and you know what I mean? And I true crime is, thank you guys. One of my is one of my many passions, right? But my other passion is TV and movies, and music. Those are the three things and snacks. So it goes. Let me just be real here. Snacks, true crime, music, and like TV and TV shows, horror films, like that kind of stuff. And I always feel like whenever shows that there aren't enough like true horror fans who talk about horror films the way I think that they should be talked about, right? Because you can be a film critic and enjoy films, but not enjoy. Oh, look at you. Thank you, Turtle Dove. I that they don't enjoy horror films. So when they talk about a horror movie or recommending horror, they the way they speak about it, they're not fans, so they don't understand. You know what I mean? And like my TV shows, the stuff that I watch on TV, like on Netflix or Hulu and stuff, it runs the gamut. Like I really want to talk about American Horror Story this season because it is. If you haven't watched it, watch it. I'm telling you. And Molson, you are a gem. You are a national treasure. Just an absolute treasure. Yes, I am fascinated by this case in Idaho. Okay. And believe me, even though I'm not really talking about it, although I did go on Positively Parker's panel the Wednesday before Thanksgiving and I had we had a great conversation. It was Parker, Kate, Sleuths, and me. It was a really excuse me. It was a really good panel. And it was a really good, interesting conversation. But this is why open cases are not my forte. I can talk about an open case when some new piece of information has come out, then I can, yeah, Parker is really cool. And you were there, Molson. You're always so supportive. Um, I can talk about a current case as new developments happen, but I can't, beyond that, it's hard for me. It's, that there's a method to the way I talk about crime, the way I think about crime. And for me, in order for me to try to even begin to figure out who did this, who committed this crime, right? I need to know more about the victims, because who was killed is, in my opinion, just as important, if not the most important, when you're first starting out to figure out a crime, right? That's one of the most important elements, who these victims were, and not just the 4 victims themselves, but the 6 people in that home, the way that they were as individuals, how they operated as a unit, and the 6 of them being roommates. All of those things are important, and it's difficult to do that um, if you are not law enforcement or media. And could I look into the 4 victims, and then in total the 6 people that lived in there? Yes, but I want to do it very responsibly. I do not want to search for things and inadvertently put something out there that is detrimental to the case, or the harm the victims or their families or the survivors in any way, shape, or form. And I, for me personally, it's a very delicate but and also difficult balance. And I always want to try to be as responsible when I'm talking about these cases as I can be. So it's just, that's the way I do it. So that, but there's also so many details beyond knowing who the victims were, right? We also don't have the details of the crime itself. Molson, this is an excellent point. So the law enforcement in all of their pressers have said that they have said that this was a targeted attack, right? But obviously they know something we don't. They know a whole lot of some things we don't. But it's difficult to even move to the suspect phase if we don't know what occurred in that home, meaning we don't have any inkling. We only know the layout of the home. We only know, we don't even actually for sure know where all of the victims were in that home, right? We know they were in the home. We know that they said that they were sleeping at the time of the attack, but that doesn't, just because we know that, it doesn't mean that they were all found in their beds or in bedrooms. Do you know what I mean? So there's so many variables that it's on, for me it feels a little like I would be talking in circles, right? So but there are several updates that I have. I'm keeping up with all of it. I'm watching all of the pressers. I am incredibly interested in this case. And one thing that I said on Parker's panel, and I still feel this way almost a week later, is that I believe when an arrest is made, I believe that we are going to be shocked at the arrest. I do think statistically, whomever, whether it was one person or multiple people, right? Whoever committed this crime has to be roughly the same age as the victims. This is a person that was able to move through this neighborhood in some capacity without standing out, which means in my opinion, like I said, the person or persons is relative is either chronologically similar in age, actually a similar age as the victims, or maybe slightly older, but looks young enough where they don't stand out. Because I think times have changed. It's not that the world has gotten less safe. I don't think that's the case. What I think is it's just as unsafe as it ever was, but we're more aware of it now. And we have more tools at our disposal for watching things than we had before. It used to be that the best deterrent, um, for your home, the best security system was a dog. And um, I still believe that. I still believe that a dog is not the only, right, but is a good deterrent. Um, and so, but we have more available to us. There's the doorbell cams. There's the surveillance that is up on buildings and on traffic lights and stuff is so much better. It's not so grainy, it's not so poor quality. And so we have more stuff like that available to us. I just I th- but at this but I also think that we educate our youth more than we used to. When I was a kid, stranger danger was what we were being taught. And the FBI has done some studies on this, and statistically speaking, stranger danger was actually detrimental to children because the way that they spoke about strangers implied that the person that you should be avoiding looks scary. They look mean. There's something about it's a physical trait. It's very difficult to convey to children um, that a stranger is somebody that you just don't know, right? It's a hard concept to explain to kids without scaring them and having them in their brains picture somebody scary, when the truth of the matter is not all monsters look like monsters. That's what makes them dangerous. So yeah. And exactly, um, Jen, this is another thing. So we educate our kids differently now. We teach them how to be aware, pay attention, to their surroundings, to take notice of stuff. We encourage um, kids to, if something feels off, to trust their instincts and to talk about it. That we've learned from mistakes, which is what we're supposed to do as a society, and we've grown, so we know better, and now we're doing better. And something that we all have now that we didn't have, like back when I would have been in college, if I had gone to college in the 90s, is our cell phones. And that is basically a tracking device. You do everything on your cell phone. And even when you're out and about, think about how many um, pictures you take in a public place. And while the subject is always obviously in the foreground, you have no idea, if you were, it's almost impossible not to capture strangers, people you don't know that are just happen to be in the same vicinity, in the background of your pictures. It's just the way it is, especially when you're young and you're out, at the bar and you're taking selfies or whatnot. You inevitably get people in the background. So it's really hard in this day and age for somebody to go completely undetected. That person, whoever did this, is likely in a picture or caught on surveillance somewhere. It's just a matter of um, going through all of the evidence, and also it's going to be lengthy. It's going to be a lengthy process because it was a college kid's house. So there were tons of friends over all the time. Do you know how difficult it's going to be for them collecting the samples of, potential DNA from that place to weed out, you know, the kids that were just there because they were at a party one time or another, right? And the actual perpetrator of the crime. Like it's going to be, it's going to take a long time. But I am watching this case intently because it's fascinating to me on multiple levels. All of it is. So, yeah. And I, of course, when Leilani Simon makes her first court appearance and there's any updates, of course, I will cover it. But I can't, you know, I don't know. I just I don't have it in me as a person. It's not, um, I'm just not good at talking about something with over and over and over without like new facts. That's why I have to take breaks from the West Memphis Three because there isn't any new anything in it. You know what I'm saying? Like after the request for the DNA testing was done, and then the judge gave their ruling, and there's an appeal. There's nothing new. But I know but that's why I have to take breaks because I have to, I don't know. I'm just not good at that. I'm not good at rehashing. I'm not good at that. Just never have been. But there are some channels in our little community that are excellent at that do a very, very good job. It's just not something I'm good at. And rather than try and like change the way the channel is, I think that because I think that saying, "Oh, I'm not ever going to cover a new, a developing case," is also not good either. So the compromise for me is when there's updates, I'll talk about it, and the rest of the time I'll talk about other stuff. I think that's a good compromise because I am interested in developing cases. I'm interested all the time, all the cases. So anyway, now that I've rattled on for an extra, I think, hour past what I was saying goodbye an hour ago. Now I'm really going to get off. So yeah, we got, there's tons of stuff. I just need to, like sit down and make myself a schedule. So I will see all of you guys back, hopefully at some point tomorrow. I know you guys have lives and work and family and stuff, but I will be live tomorrow morning at 8:50 a.m. and we will patiently wait for the defense's closing statements, and then we will talk about it in the evening. All right, and then we'll be on verdict watch hopefully by the end of the day tomorrow, depending on how long the defense takes. And then, of course, there's the jury instructions. So, look at you, Turtle Dove. You want to come over? I know you don't live far. You don't live far. And what needs to be cleaned up in this house is the baseboards. I need to get after those. But it hurts. My back is bad, they're not like terrible, but you know how it is. Anyway. Thank you guys all for being here. I appreciate the support. If you have not done so already, please thumbs up the stream and share it to people that you think might enjoy it, and especially anybody that's, watching these cases like we all are. I would appreciate it. You guys have a great rest of your Monday, and I will see you guys back here tomorrow at 8:50 a.m. Eastern Time. All right. Good night. Bye.